As always, thank everybody for your time. Alan, I see you're on. We're excited for you and sad to see you leave. Very bittersweet. So thank you for all your hard work on this. Let's see. So a couple quick recommendations or a couple quick notes as far as agenda goes today. Received two additional recommendations. One is with regards to continued committee engagement, and that comes from Susan Lyons, and also natural and nature-based solutions coming from Laura Cantrell. And she is going to be, and I said she'd be a couple minutes late, but be walking us through that today. Also, prior to going through that, also we'll have an update on the finance strategy. Amy was unfortunately not able to join us. She had a kind of unexpected item pop up she had to go address. And so anyway, Kaylin's kind enough to walk us through that strategy that Amy put together, the two major agenda items that we'll be going through today. As far as timing goes, what I'd say is that we present at the November 23rd City Council meeting. That still gives lots of time, language, and distribute. And I'd also say, as opposed to having another meeting next week, what I would say is everybody take that time that would be allotted for that. I'm going to send out language once Dale should be back with us on Monday. Send out language for everybody to take a look at, comment on. And so I'd say use that time that we usually have for this meeting to comment on the language that goes out. Because we'll have one additional meeting on the 17th at which we can discuss any, the additional comments and look at them as incorporated. Any kind of thoughts, questions, comments there into the agenda? Great. Okay. So Kaylin, if you wouldn't mind, please kicking us off with the finance strategy.
Sure. Thanks, Sagood. Dale sends his apologies. He is out on medical leave this week and will be back in action next week. And so if there's any questions that I can't answer regarding updates in general or with this finance strategy, I will take those questions to Dale and Amy and get you a response as soon as possible. Really quick before I pull up the finance slides, Dale wanted to relay some updates that we've been doing with public engagement. I think some of you tuned in on the 21st. We had the council workshop with the U.S. Army Corps, our design division, stormwater, and Dale. We also had a couple community meetings in the past 2 weeks. We had a meeting with the Gastonboro neighborhood there on the east side, as well as sat in the Wagner Terrace virtual neighborhood meeting, and we had the Rosemont community meeting that was led by the Army Corps 2 weekends ago. We've also continued engagement with some stakeholders. We've met with the West Edge Board, Coastal Conservation League, the Realtors, Morrison Yards, and the Charleston Visitors Bureau. And we continue to have engagement with the Metro Chamber. I sent that link to Dale's presentation from a few weeks ago, and Councilman Seekings and Dale have also been giving updates to their regional policy advocacy committees. And further, we had a meeting last week. It was a really positive meeting with the State Resilience Office. And I'll give a little bit of update on that in regards to financing as well. And we plan to advise their resilience policy committee that is helping develop the state resilience plan in December. We'll be going up to Columbia for that. Additionally, we've continued engagement with our congressional delegation and are in talks with our DC consultants and Senator Graham's office about some order requests that will be going in for next year. And depending, if the city and council votes to move to PED, that's something that we would want to have authorized in WRDA next year. So that could begin. And then additionally, I know that there were some requests for General Kelly, the South Atlantic Division Commander, is going to be in town to present to council on November 9th. We did put a request for him to come before the committee. We're still waiting for that. So that may be a fly by your seat if he's able to do that, and I'll send out any updates on that end. Furthermore, we are, the Army Corps has sent us over their comment period ended October 25th, and we are tracking and digesting some of those public comments that came in as well. Okay, I think that this now will segue into the finance presentation. Let me just share my screen. I did send the 2 slides out on Friday, but let me make sure. Okay, is everybody seeing that? No?
No, I can't. Oh, there we go. Got it now.
How to fund PED. Is everybody seeing that now? Okay, great. So Dale first presented this to the council on the 21st, and this strategy and numbers were developed in coordination with Amy, the city CFO. So you'll see that the first slide focuses on PED. There was a more focus on the PED numbers because that's really the decision that the city's at right at this point. Because remember, for construction, the city is only going to commit to the construction funding if we decide that we want to buy the plan that's designed and developed in PED. And again, at any point in PED, the city can terminate the study, pause the study. So we'll start with the first numbers here. So the Army Corps gave us an estimate of $17 million over 3 to 4 years for the cost in PED. The sources that they identified were, to begin with, the tourism fund, which accounts for, on the peninsula, the hospitality and the accommodations tax. So Amy projected a 10-year surplus of those numbers through the life of PED. And we designated 50% of that surplus could be used to cover PED costs for that 3 to 4 years. Now, just remember that for the peninsula, both the accommodation and hospitality can only be used in areas of the city that are deemed in the tourist districts. So as you can see, those percentages where you see 80, 100, 50, and 0, those are the percentage of the project in the 4 phase areas that could be covered through those costs. So for phase 1, that's the Ashley Riverside, 80% of that was deemed to be in the tourism district. Phase 2, High and Low Battery, 100% of that was deemed. And East Side, 50%. And Wagner Terrace, not in the tourist district, so 0% of that could go for that phase. And then the way you break that down a little more specifically, so for example, phase 3, so if you're using 50% of the 50% surplus, that would be 25% of that total surplus of the accommodation and hospitality funds. And you can see the numbers on the right that we're breaking down for that 3 to 4 years that would cover. And then moving down.
Kaylin, before you leave there, if you don't mind, when they say 50% of surplus, what surplus are they talking about?
So Amy projected a surplus that the city would have in its account for the tourism fund, which would be encompass the hospitality and the accommodations taxes. She said she presented this 10-year surplus 2 ways and means. So council should be aware of it. I can ping Amy on any additional.
No, don't worry about it. I'll get with Amy. I just
So these are numbers that Amy said projected that over the next 10 years, the city would have from both a surplus from the hospitality account and the accommodations account. So that's where these numbers were pulled from.
Hey, Keith, I talked to her at length about this. What she's projecting is a surplus based on currently and known capital projects needs that will be funded by hospitality and accommodations on the peninsula.
Right.
So, and she's projected that surplus based on current projected capital projects.
But did we say 10 years, a surplus over 10 years?
Yeah.
So we'll be pre-spending that surplus?
Yes.
How does that work?
We're going to find out. Plus, remember, the other thing is on the hospitality dollars and the accommodations dollars, 50% of the current amounts that we collect are being used to pay for the low battery seawall. And we're going to try to accelerate that project for phase 3 and extend its length and bond against some of that money. So it's going to get complicated.
It's a significant part of PED funding strategy. There's a couple of questions of curiosity here that, if this doesn't come through, then we got no plan.
This would have to be approved by
So for 10 years, pre-spending a 10-year projected. Okay.
I mean, this would have to come to council on an annualized basis. We can't bind future commitments to that money. So it'd be every year you'd have to come back for that 50% of the surplus.
Yes, my understanding is.
Yeah, and I just don't know where those physical dollars would come from in year 3 of PED, if we're assuming years 5 through 10 are going to occur. I don't get it.
I can get a little more clarity on that for you, Bob, to report back. But my
Appreciate it,
understanding
yeah.
is, as Councilman Seekings, that, annually the Army Corps will come to us with what they're going to request for the budget. And the surplus would go into, each year prior to that would go into a sort of savings account that the CFO would set up, that, the money then the city could use in each annual phase. But it would be on an annual basis. And obviously it's a 10-year projection. PED is only 3 to 4 years. So, and each phase would be a different cost. We anticipate the first couple of phases would be a little larger cost than some of the other ones, but that's the numbers that were projected as requested by the committee as a strategy. But I can get more clarity on those numbers as well.
While we're at a moment, Kaylin.
Yes.
I heard, yeah, good morning, everyone. I heard you breaking down the percentage for areas of the peninsula.
Yep.
And I did not hear any verbiage as pertaining to Rosemont.
So Rosemont, Herbert, would begin in phase 1. So that's included in phase 1, the non-structural. So that would be phase 1, that Ashley Riverside. So that
Correct
would
me if I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. I apologize. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but just to address Herbert's point, it's in my experience, like with TIF funding, with like mid funding in the city of Charleston, and council members Waring and Seekings can weigh in on this. It's not like the percentage is the percentage of the total dollars. It's more, I guess, related to the sources of funds than the uses of funds. The uses of the project, really just the tourism areas, is just the percentage of those hospitality funds that can be used towards that project. So there's no, on the uses front, like where the funds actually get spent, it's not like they get spent in one area versus another. They get spread across the whole project. It's just the percentage of the source of those funds, the hospitality funds that can be used towards the project.
That's correct, because they have to be used in the designated tourism district.
I was just curious, hey, good, Kaylee, the mentioning of the splitting the city up percentage, and I don't hear any language in there about Rosemont, and that's my concern.
No, Herbert, I mean, those were split up based off of the phasing that we were given by the Army Corps. In Rosemont,
say that again.
The numbers were split up by the 4 phases that we were given by the Army Corps that the project would move forward, that we've discussed. And phase 1 would include the non-structural component, which is Rosemont, and that Ashley River area.
And that's 80%.
And 80% of that area is designated as tourism district. So
I had a question.
sure.
Projecting out 2-3 years is really hard these days. And what happens if either we have a big storm and tourism falls off, or we have a recession and tourism falls off, or something happens in some other city, gets the #1 designation by all the magazines. What happens if all this money that we are projecting doesn't show up?
Again, at any time in PED, the city can pause. The Army Corps on an annual basis is going to come to the city and say, we're putting in this request to Congress for this project this year. They're not going to put that request in if the city says, you know, we had a tough year, you know, pandemic, hurricane, what have you. If we can't meet our match, then they're not going to request the money to appropriate it, and they'll put a pause. We can pause PED, or we can just completely terminate it if we don't like the direction that it's going. But if it's a financial bind that the city finds itself in, that it's not able to commit to the request that the Corps is asking for, then the Corps won't make that request, and we'll just put a pause until the city can come up with that money again.
Okay, and I think I asked this before. Who makes that decision? How does that decision get made?
You
Council,
mean in regards to whether the city can, I would refer to the council members on the call, but I think that would be the.
yeah,
CFO and
that'd be
city
100% a council call.
Yeah, council
It's
call.
100%. It's finance related. So Susan, just to answer your question really briefly, I think Kaylin gave it the right answer. I mean, Amy's a very conservative projectionist. Based on what we know today, those are the projections of the surplus and the hospitality funds and the accommodations funds. But all bets are off if something untoward and unexpected comes. I mean, for everything, not just for this project, but for any projects that are either in whole or in part funded through hospitality and accommodations dollars. We're at the mercy of the economic situation of the day, the week, the month, the year. It looks like things are going to be good. I mean, we had the busiest month we've ever had at our airport last month. But again, things can change on a moment's notice, like we saw in 2020. I mean, we went from full speed to hitting a wall in a day. So
Right.
again, that's just something that we're going to have to deal with, not with just this project, but many, including low battery, by the way, as we look forward.
And do keep in mind too, as mentioned, our current capital projects that are using the same account. For example, the city put in a request to the state to get some recovery funds for low battery and a couple other priority projects. They punted that decision of where that money goes to next year. So say the low battery gets that funding from the state or from another federal grant program, some of that money could be redistributed as well in the future for PED. If we don't have any more questions on this specific.
Well, let me follow up on that point. I mean, obviously agree with everything Mike said, but to Susan's point, let's just say we had agreed to do this process in 19. Because of the pandemic, we would have had to pause it in 20, and we would have had to pause it in 21. Because we are just getting our revenues back up to basically, and these sources anyway, back up to 19 levels. So to your point, a hurricane, or anything that is subject to the ebb and flow of tourism in our economy. There you go.
I would make one further point. If we do get that storm and we did move into PED, there's a very good possibility that we would get an influx of federal funding for whatever, disaster recovery. And if we had a plan on the table, I mean, our 35 cost share could go down to 0%. That's a possibility too. So if we moved into PED and a storm came and we had our plan on the shelf, so to speak, that could generate more federal funding coming in quicker as well in that scenario.
I would make one additional observation, and I think this really needs to be pressure tested for reasonability. One comparability issue in this math is that there's going to be competing interests for those surplus dollars. And, we're comparing future projections of surplus against currently planned capital projects. over the next 3 years or 10 years, if that math somehow works, there are going to be additional projects added competing for these dollars. I mean, taking a snapshot of projected capital projects today and matching that with surplus projections over the next 10 years is a little bit of a discontinuity there. But, I think this really needs to be pressure tested for basic logic.
Hey, just three just quick points. One is, Dennis, I know you've been wanting to weigh in, so I want to get to you, and just two quick follow-up points. Well, Dennis, why don't you go ahead, and then I'll kind of make my other 2 points afterwards.
Is this the total cost of the head phase? Is this being matched? Is this our share of the larger total?
This is our share. I think the total is 50 million, around that, for total PED cost. So this is just the non-federal sponsor match.
Okay.
Am I right? It all depends on congressional approval of our project, right?
Correct. Each year, and that's what I was talking about at the beginning of the meeting. We were reached out to by Senator Graham's office about city priorities and Army Corps projects to be authorized in the next WRDA bill. So this project would need to be authorized and then appropriated by Congress. Obviously, with the high BCR, it's a likelihood that would be included and happen if we so requested it in the Army Corps, with the final chief's report and the support of the non-federal sponsor. But yes, everything would have to come with the federal funding from Congress to the Army Corps.
Just two quick follow-up points here. One is Herbert, I just want to make sure that your point got addressed, because I think it's an important one, that there's no, for this 50% of surplus and the percentages and the tourism areas and all that, that doesn't mean that one location is prioritized as far as the spending of those dollars over another. The dollars will be spent equally across the project. I just want to make sure that point gets clearly made, so there's no confusion there. Is that, Herbert, does that kind of get you cleared up?
I thank you, Haggard. I hear you, and I'm listening to our conversations as we hold our meetings. And when I don't hear Rosemont being included after all the concerns have been expressed to this committee and to the council and to the mayor, when I just heard the breakdown of the funding and it didn't include Rosemont as you went around the peninsula, that's disconcerting to me. So I asked the questions, because if, like what Sue said, if there is a downturn as far as money's coming in, then how does that affect those who aren't included in the language as far as being part of the mitigation?
So my understanding here is that it's really more based on, this is like those, say the quote unquote tourism areas. That's where the money would be coming from, not where the money would be to.
And to clarify, and that was I guess I'll take a mistake for that, but I just was designated in the 4 phases that the project's consistently been designated in. So I could say phase 1, including Rosemont, moving forward, to make sure that Herbert, that Rosemont is 100% included in this funding. I mean, to the point that in the first phase, it's 80%, because Rosemont isn't a tourism district. So that source of revenue wouldn't be applied to Rosemont in that situation, but it could be applied for that whole area. So, but Rosemont, whatever funding is coming from the city will be going to Rosemont as well. It's not going to be left out from the federal government contribution or the city contribution. and it will be addressed in that first phase of PED. So make no mistake about it, Rosemont is included.
And these are funds to fund PED
Correct.
design, not
Correct.
construction.
Right.
Correct. Okay, and
Just
and-
real,
sure.
Yeah,
I just want to get
yeah.
through some of this to know that we have some time constraints, but go ahead.
sure. Just one more quick question. To Bob's point, he asked earlier, and this might be a question for the council members. We just want to put a fine point on this question. So say this goes forward, say, hey, City of Charleston is committed to this project, and here's the estimated cost of that project to the city being this 17.1 million. What happens there with the way that those funds are reserved on the city level? And I just want to put a fine point on Bob's question.
So we probably wouldn't reserve them because we'd have to approve them on an annualized basis. So literally through the PED phasing process, which is a 4-phase process, you have to look at the city finance side as an annualized phased process. The Army Corps would come to us saying, the next phase, the next year of PED is going to cost X, your share is X, 35% X. We then have to, at City Council, approve those dollars and identify where those dollars are going to come from. Now, there is some possibility, and I have no idea, this is just thinking, I'm not saying this is going to happen or not, that if we can appropriate more money towards this project than the Corps asked for in any year, and then put that in the bank, that's actually how we handled, and I thank my fellow council member Waring, for having some foresight on this. That's how we funded Low Battery. We actually took surplus money from hospitality and accommodations, and over the course of 5 or 6 years, put that money in the bank. So, but it would be an annual funding request that we would have to approve every single year for as long as PED went on. And the same thing, by the way, during construction, which is a function setup. Unless we put it to a vote and bonded it, we've got caps on our bonding capability in the city, unless we put it to a referendum and then that cap is not applicable. So it's possible that somewhere in the future, this could go to referendum, I suspect. Possible. And
Thank you.
Keith, if I said anything you disagree with, please chime in.
You spot on, Councilman. The council dedicated toward appropriating money towards that low battery wall, and high battery for that matter wall. But Councilman Seekins is right. One council cannot bind a future council, in particular with annual appropriation. This is a plan, but you wouldn't buy a house this way. Well, you wouldn't. I mean, you have to go get a mortgage, and you have to prove your income to qualify for that mortgage. This is a big project that we all are extremely interested in, because we know we need to do something. And my part in this is, where's plan B? If not this, then what? Because, last time we were on this meeting, I said this was kind of like when Dale explained it, I said it was kind of like taking Jello and throwing it up against the wall, hoping it'll stick. Dealing with surplus in this era of government, for a long-term financial plan, dealing with surpluses with government, I've never seen a project like that done in the history of Charleston. So we got a long history. Our $1 billion projects have not been financed this way. So I've said it before, there's a pattern out there. I appreciate the stakeholders around this table, but even this plan has been made better as a result of this committee. My understanding is that the State Ports Authority has been successful in having some alternatives to the wall. But if they were not around the table, voicing that, I doubt that that change would take place. Herbert has consistently been standing up for those who doesn't have a voice out there in Rosemont. But the truthful part about it, the uneasiness, and he certainly can speak for himself, but the uneasiness he feels, and I do too. Phase one includes Rosemont. Well, what does that mean? I mean, what does that mean? They included to do what specifically? And for a community that's been so often left out for simple drainage, and when I mean simple drainage, a proper ditch and a proper sized pipe, it's not a lot of confidence when you say a marginalized community is included without specifics. So we need to get away from the political speak now and get to the tactics, the fundamentals on how you pay for $1 billion project. And you don't pay for $1 billion project with 10-year anticipated surpluses in governments that, I got to tell you, the task that Councilman Seekings, myself, and the mayor and the Marina Council is tasked with, we have an expense to run this city that we don't have enough revenue to do it. I don't care what revenue you're talking about, property taxes, the income from the garages, permit fees going to building services department. We have more expenses than we have income to do. And that's the reality. We got we have trash truck drivers leaving the city because they can double their pay in the private sector. We're down something like 30 or 40 police officers. So the days of surpluses, Councilman Seekings, I think you'd be right there with me. We'd be right there saying, great, we got all these surpluses. But I haven't seen it. And going forward with the conservative mantra through the country, no new taxes. I think 75% of our General Assembly has signed no new tax pledges. That's fine if you find a way to take care of inflation. The cost of government is just flat out going up. We had 7 crews that clean ditches. We now have 2 because you can't hire people who go out there with pickaxes and shovel $13.50 an hour. Now, I'm on a platform here, but I just want to give the reality of this committee that I don't think we should accept surpluses as being the plan for 10 years. I just never seen $1 billion project financed that way. And I'll be happy to be wrong on that. That's the reality as I see this. We need to roll up the sleeves and go to work and find out truly how to pay for this thing.
Well, this is probably a segue for your second slide, Kaylin.
Sure. I'll just continue briefly over the last 2 sources there that were strategized. Amy projected that over the next 10 years that we would have a surplus of 3 mills, and the proposed was to identify 1 mill for this project for PED. And then the last source, obviously now it's looking incredibly likely that the state Ports Authority will be enclosed in an updated alignment. So we thought it appropriate to request from the state some funding for PED, particularly for that phase 3. So in our discussion with the State Resilience Fund, they have, with the State Resilience Office, they have a dedicated fund for resilience projects across the state. Specifically, they get their funding from the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funding. And they confirmed that in the year 23-24, $500,000, $600,000 could easily be dedicated to this project for PED from that fund. And I will say, and Dale relayed to me, all of these numbers, whether it's 50% of the surplus, council obviously has the right to fluctuate. If you want to ask the state for 1 million for PED, or, you know, all these numbers can be worked, but this was the strategy of pots of money that were identified for PED. So moving on to construction.
I
Again,
have a quick question.
Yep, sure.
Quick. I just make sure I understand the, can you go back? There you go. The dedicated millage bank, the 1 mil, is that represented by the 7,112,165.90? So that's a
Yes,
10-year,
yes,
that's
over
a
the course
10-year
of,
1 mil dedication. Okay,
yes.
that's pretty
yes.
conservative, actually.
And I think the equivalent, I was told that 1 mil is at now is 1.7 million.
Yeah, that's right. So for all of you, I'm not sure if you know what that refers to. That's our property tax millage. And we have a little bit of a bank that gets a little controversial. But yeah, 1 mil equals, I think that's about $1.5 million when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
Hey, Kaylin, I'm sorry, one additional request.
Yep.
We need to see this on a cash basis. Where do the physical dollars get sourced from? We're writing checks. Where do the checks, you know, get funded from, as opposed to projection math? I think that's, I'm afraid that might be a fatal flaw in this analysis. We need to see cash.
Okay. I
Kaylin?
can. Yep.
I have a
Jordy, I
question
think.
too. So the number again, oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. The number that the city was asking for from the state resiliency fund, what is that number again?
At the moment, we projected it at 600,000. That was basically what was left between
Available.
adding up the other 3 accounts.
And you're asking for it specifically to fund portions of the east side phase?
Yes, that would, the request for that would be going for phase 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I will move to the construction side. Again, remember, if and only if the city decides it wants to buy the design and plan from PED, then that's when we would move into construction. As of now, the Army Corps is anticipating construction would be from the years 2026 to 2032. You know, obviously, you can see through the numbers here, there's going to be a gap, but we start with our total city match is 385. That is including PED and construction. So if you're going down the chart here, you deduct the PED cost of 17 million. We've talked before on the calls that through real estate credits and easements, the city would get 130 million. So that leaves the total remaining construction costs at 238 million. You'll see that the same sources of city funding were projected for use. That includes the same 50% surplus for those hospitality fees and a dedicated 1 mil. And the numbers below that were just identified of what could be requested from the state and the county. And so an estimated request for the state would be 75 million and the county 25 million. Just to remember, this would not be, you know, this would be over the projected time period of construction, which Army Corps gave us 8 years. It could go a little longer. It could go shorter if that storm comes through. But again, we may get a higher percentage of federal funding if we're in disaster recovery mode. So you'll see there in the red is what would be left over if we were to go with those specific sources of funding. We're almost at $102 million that we're still in the red in the shortfall of funding. And below you'll see some, whether it's been discussed through this committee or things that Dale and Amy have started to analyze of what could potentially be the city could use to cover that shortfall of funding over that period of time. One idea is MID for the peninsula, and this would specifically just be, you know, getting funds from those folks on the peninsula, would not be citywide. Dale is currently reaching out to some folks to request analysis on what this would yield. Local option sales tax. There's currently some TIF districts that this money could potentially be pulled from. and if the council decided they wanted to dedicate additional millage. And then Dale is also, it's a newer idea, resilience bonds. And this, he tells me this would not affect the city's bond rating, and it's leveraging private money. He's working on setting up some meetings with some folks that are the front runners in this kind of world. So those are the sort of options that have been identified to pay for that shortfall of funding. And then I will.
Jalen, if you don't mind, who's the team getting together that convenes to matriculate what we're going through? Who's actually sitting down doing it?
Dale and Amy have been having the conversations prior to the workshop. You know, this was presented to the mayor when we put this out, but it's primarily been Dale and Amy have been having the conversations on the strategy.
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna ask the county for 25 million. My understanding, the first time they saw that was when it was printed in the newspaper about a week or so ago after our workshop. But the county's not going to be involved with the process.
I'm sorry. I should go back and say we have engaged and have we've engaged with the county. The end of this summer, we've had the conversations with the state, so it's on their radar. They know a request is coming. But just for
all
this,
all I can tell you is some of the telephone calls I got from elected members of county council after that appeared in the newspaper. Okay, those were telephone calls I got from the county council members that said, you know, they read it in the newspaper for the first time. Okay. But thank you. You answered the question. You answered the question. I wanted to know who was the mind meld that came up with the total. So thank you.
Okay. I can get a clear outline of that strategy for you, Councilman, to send you as well. And then last week, when I initially sent these slides out, we put a request out for some questions from the committee that could be answered by Amy and Dale ahead of time. We received 2 questions from the funding working group. So, Mr. Chairman, if you approve, I'm just going to go over those questions really briefly. One of the first questions the funding group asked was whether if the city, why does the city on the timing, why does the city have to vote on this report that has not yet been made final? And if the city didn't vote on to move forward to PED, would the Corps cease to advance the report? We were told by the Corps that over the past month that the vote from council could potentially shift to January if necessary, but the Corps is still going to submit their report to headquarters regardless of the city's support or not, because they need to put a bow on this project they've been working on for the 4 years. The difference is that if it's submitted to headquarters without the support of the non-federal sponsor, it all but terminates the study. And then I will just quote Dale, let me be clear, without a signal from the city that it commits to being a partner in PED, the study will stop. There's no way the Corps will ask Congress for PED or any other funding if there's not a willing federal partner. So that was the kind of response to that first question. And then the second question was regarding funding for other water management projects. And if the city moves forward with this project, are there adequate funds to proceed with other water flood management projects unrelated? And the answer to that is yes, there will be, this isn't going to be taking funding from other projects. There's already a dedicated revenue source through the stormwater and drainage fees, and that won't be touched for this project. And as we mentioned before, the city is asking the state for money to help pay for other projects like low battery and the brick arch restoration. If the city gets that funding, it would not be touched for this project. So the sources that were identified for PED and construction are other sources that wouldn't be competing with current stormwater and drainage projects in the city. Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. There's a queue for questions. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. Those were the 2 that were submitted by the funding working group prior to today's meeting. So I just wanted to make sure we sent those answers to Cashin, which I believe she shared with the working group, but wanted to share that with the entire group. That's all I have as far as the presentation with the strategy and any follow-up questions we received. So we can open it up for any further discussion on this. I know we have to move through some other agenda items as well, but so Mr. Chairman, I'll let you moderate the conversation.
No, thanks. And just the order I see on my screen is just Kevin, Susan, Bob is the way the little yellow hands are looking at the moment. Kevin, you want to go for it and then just work through those three?
Yeah, thanks, Hagen. And Kaylin, thanks for the report. I'm sure this is stating the obvious, but as we look at the unfunded portion for the project construction, $101 million, that's probably grossly understated, given the betterments and all the discussions that we've had, as we imagine what a fully realized wall might look like that serves the community. So as we explore those alternative funding sources, I think will be important to understand how high is up in each of those categories of potential funding. What's realistic for us to think about? And then obviously we'll have to balance that at some point against the other needs throughout the community for other resilience efforts. But I think 101 million is very conservative estimate at this point.
Great point, Kevin. Makes a lot of sense. I guess that'll just be a question to Amy and also on how we can mitigate that risk, cost overruns, what that looks like as far as sources of those funds. Maybe Kevin, we jot that down as a note to bring up with Amy.
Yeah, I mean, these obviously were all just projected off of the numbers that we were given by the Army Corps. Clearly, if the city wants to move forward with betterments that would be 100% funded through the city, that would increase the cost. I would point out though that if something that whether it's through betterments or additional resiliency projects not related to this project, we could still go out and get other federal grants and things that would go, so it wouldn't be double dipping for other federal avenue of resources and things as well.
Thanks. Susan.
Yeah, I had a question about the timing. We have recommended to council that the city in conjunction with the Army Corps do a resilience study for Rosemont, and that might dovetail in some way with what the Army Corps is planning. I'm not clear at all about the timing on that and who's going to pay for that, and how that fits in with this timeline that's being put forward for money, as well as actual construction or mitigation.
Thanks, Susan. So the Rosemont Resiliency Plan that was presented and recommended to council, that really would be a separate thing for the city, because a lot of the other water management issues that are in Rosemont are not going to be funded through this project because they're not surge related. You're looking at drainage, stormwater, a lot of that ideas. So that's something I think that could be wrapped up with the comprehensive water plan and coincide with this project, but it would be really on the city in a separate city initiative, separate than this project, because this project again is focused on surge, and a lot of the other challenges and concerns in Rosemont that are water related aren't related to surge. They're related, and that's what this study and this recommendation that the committee put forward would address. So that would be a separate thing, and I think that's something then with the Resilience Office and Dale would be working to put together, present to council, put in a funding request for that. And obviously all of that takes a little bit of time, but I think it would coincide with this project, but it would be separate.
Now, I understand it would be separate. I just don't understand how the timing would work and the money. And I certainly understand about the surge issue, but they're all connected. And it sort of sounded like there was a fuzzy boundary somehow between the Army Corps and the city and how this might get paid for and when. So I just wanted to put that out there because it's not clear to me.
Okay, we can get you more clear answers on that.
And to piggyback off of that, it's not clear to me either, because I keep hearing that there's no storm surge in Rosemont, and that is not the truth. The last storm that came through the city, there was a storm surge there. The residents validated that by saying so. And so the concerns of the residents continue to seem to be that Rosemont isn't being addressed in this project. And it is clear to them that they have been excluded as far as not looking at there as a valid reasoning to like have some mitigation for storm surge. So how do we get this in this committee to be relayed to the Army Corps that that's something that has to be addressed? And looking at our conversation, looking at my conversation representing Rosemont, when I come to this committee, I'm constantly saying, what is going to be done? What is going to be done? And I keep hearing, oh, you're covered, you're covered. But that's just language, that's just words that I'm hearing, but I don't see the language.
So the way Herbert
and excuse me a minute before, the end part of what I'm trying to get at is, I hear you saying it's going to be covered, it's going to be funded. And to me, based on the historical value of looking at how Rosemont and has been addressed, we'll kick the can down a little further. We'll kick the can down a little further. Yeah, we'll get to you. We'll get to you. And we're left holding the bag. And here we are again. And I'm looking for some sort of assurance that Rosemont will be included in the mitigation to preserve that community.
So Herbert, the assurance you have is that in the feasibility study, the Army Corps to mitigate surge risk has identified non-structural measures in Rosemont. And that was due to elevation of Rosemont, and that the wall, like the actual structural wall, just the engineering and the elevation wouldn't have protected Rosemont from surge. So they identified non-structural measures, which is the flood proofing and the elevation. That is what the Army Corps is committed to doing for Rosemont, specific to surge and to this project. And that includes the 65% federal funding and 35% city match that will cover the entirety of the cost of elevating homes and floodproofing homes in Rosemont. That's what the Corps identified. So Rosemont is included. They're not included in the structural seawall because the engineering and feasibility study decided it wasn't feasible to have that structure in Rosemont. So it's a non-structural is what has been included for Rosemont for surge. Now the Rosemont Resiliency Plan that was recommended from this committee, that would work to identify the other water management challenges in Rosemont. I can help get a little more clarity. I know that the Army Corps spent a good chunk of time out on the 12th in the community. They had their lead civil engineer out there. I know they put together the pamphlets. They put together the Q&A of the questions that were brought to the city and this committee for Rosemont. And throughout this project, we're going to continue to engage with Rosemont as requested when you continue to. And I'm sorry that the communication or the clarity of Rosemont not being included is what's being presented to the community, but they are included. It's just not within the structure. It's the non-structural measures to mitigate from surge. And I can work with you offline or through this committee, and ask Dale and with the Corps and how we can continue to engage and communicate that Rosemont is included in this project to mitigate surge.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylin. For one, let's be clear, the community does not want a wall. Mm-hmm. But looking at email that has been sent to this committee from various sources, nature-based and et cetera, there are other alternatives. And sometimes when I listen to us in committee, it's like the Army Corps of Engineers has made its mind up that like this is their design and we're not looking at any other alternative. And again, when the mayor was sitting in our meeting, it was like, why are we going to buy a horse that doesn't fit what we want to have get done?
And again, some of those
That is my,
can be
excuse me?
addressed, and look, some of those alternatives can be explored in PED, you know. What
Okay,
Alan
and-
presented in his design, that's what the city's bringing to the table to explore in PED.
Okay. Again, my concern now, hearing what you're saying, I don't want Rosemont to be left behind and say we're going to like have you catch up. And we're talking about funding. And thank you, Councilman Warren. We're looking at funding, and it's hard enough now to look at funding for the whole city. So now you're going to incorporate Rosemont, and again down the line, it's like no money. Matter of fact, I've heard in this committee meeting that there's no money for Rosemont. You know, so I'm hearing conflicting things, and it is, I believe, incumbent upon me to express the concerns, not only of Rosemont, but of me, and addressing what the whole committee is trying to do, preserve Charleston.
Hey, Herbert, this is Haygood. I'll jump in here. I mean, we do have a Rosemont recommendation. I mean, that'll be part of our document, already has been presented up. What I'd recommend is take a look at that recommendation. And we can recirculate it. If there's anything you want to add, I mean, we have the Rosemont Resiliency Study in here. But that is the deliverable that goes, right? That's in writing. So what I'd say, I think we're all on the same page. I don't think anybody disagrees here. I think as far as this committee and our deliverables and our the work items that result from our work, I think anything that you'd want to have in there, let's incorporate, right? I mean, let's get that in there, because that's really what goes forward and what's going to be the product that comes from this committee's time. And so, we can sit here and talk about it as much as we want. I don't mean to sound, I hope you don't, it's a little bit cavalier of me to say, but I mean, let's get it in writing. Let's go. Now is the time to put that into some sort of documentation and put that forward for action. But I think, we don't have to debate it. I think we're all on the same page. I think Rosemont absolutely bears further study. So we're all on the same page there. And I think we just need to put that into writing and make a recommendation and go. And again, I say at the risk of sounding cavalier, but I want to make that point and, make it clear. I think we're all on a team together, and this is how we do it.
Haggard, I thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Yes, sir. My
Here, I'm
pleasure.
just gonna chime in just to be the timekeeper as well for the meeting. We have about 30 minutes left, and I know you had 2 other agenda items there.
Yeah, we got Bob has one question, and then hit that, and then we need to get through Susan's recommendation, which it's very straightforward, makes a lot of sense. Get through Laura's recommendation, and then I think that'll be it. Yes. Bob, please go for it.
Yeah, not so much a question as an observation. We keep talking about dollars as the only constrained resource, and I think another constrained resource is manpower expertise. So a big loss with Alan's departure. At some point, I think a resolution about city staffing, either internal or external, to pull off these projects. We talk about drainage project funding being segregated from potential 3x3 funding. But beyond that, focus, expertise, just attention to detail, all those things that aren't dollar denominated, but are critical to project success. We need a plan for that as well. And I don't know if that's a table of organization, a staffing plan, but we shouldn't lose track of that in terms of projecting budgetary requirements, because we don't have the staff to pull off, current projects, let alone a ginormous project like 3x3. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
It's well taken. Thank you, Bob. Go for it, Councilmember Seeking. Saw your hand up.
So just briefly before we move on, I know one of the two questions that was asked that was posed by Kalen was, I think the second question was funding for other capital improvement projects vis-a-vis water management, or whether this would, anything we do here would impact them. Just to be clear, for the large scale water management projects, so the one that's in my mind, it's always on my mind, is Calhoun West, which and this is just Mike Seeking talking, I think is the most important capital improvement project that's currently unfunded in the city. We have not identified funding sources for that either. So to the extent there's competition for dollars, clearly there will be competition for dollars going forward. That's a $500 million project. And I can just tell you that I, along with others, want that project to happen, regardless of what happens here with 3x3. So just, I think it's not quite 100% accurate to say that you can segregate 3x3 from other capital projects when the sources for funding have been identified for neither. So there will be competition going forward, because if you look at the second page of the projections that are put out there, one of which is a long-term 1 mil tax increase. That's going to take a vote of council. So there's some funding challenges that will also be exacerbated and multiplied by the fact that we do have other capital needs for water management. Again, and just so it's clear, Calhoun West to me is by far the most important, by far.
Thank you, Councilmember Seeking. That's an important clarification. Much appreciated. I guess just to, as Kalen mentioned, I know we're getting tight on time. I asked Laura, would you mind walking us through the recommendation you put forward? I know it was did not make its way on the agenda, but just given the timing, but it's important, and would love, for that reason, would love for you to walk through it. And
Sure.
Please go for
Sure.
it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to do that. And before I do, I really want to underscore Bob's point about staff capacity, and that's not related to the recommendations that I put forward related to nature-based solutions, except that it's related to everything. So I hope that we will make that an agenda item for some further discussion, and I would love to see us put forward as a recommendation to council that they figure out how to have the funding and capacity we need for staff expertise. It's going to be really important. With regard to the recommendations, and I see that it's up on the slide and it circulated earlier this week. I won't read it to you, and we've, obviously we've talked a lot about the incorporation of natural and nature-based features as a strong preference. And from our perspective as a conservation organization, we think that it's imperative to push the Corps to be implementing this project in a way that is as environmentally sensitive as possible. I also shared with you the comment letter that we submitted to the Corps on the draft EIS. That was 41 pages that you can read at your leisure, that will go into, of course, a lot more detail than I am going to. And my motivation here was to craft some language that this committee could be comfortable from the perspective of, multiple stakeholders, like we all are, in making recommendations to council. And we continue to believe that there is an opportunity for the Corps to incorporate more nature-based features into the design. This committee has talked a lot about how we're dealing with a less than ideal process. We're being asked to make, for the city to make an investment, a commitment to move forward, when there are still a lot of questions that need to be answered that can't be answered until we make the commitment. And that seems like a backwards way to have to do business, but that's the reality. We continue to believe that there is more meaningful evaluation and analysis of some of these nature-based features that the Corps can do. We appreciate that they have taken some initial steps and have included some of these features, but we think they remain superficial. And there are a lot of questions about exactly why they proposed what they did and where and to what benefit. So to get to the points that I submit for your consideration as a set of committee recommendations, we would suggest that the Corps adopt the design division's 16 areas that they propose to break down the perimeter plan and further evaluate a wide array of nature-based solutions that could be incorporated. Some things that, some response that we've heard from the Corps and in discussion that I've had about this project has been that the purpose of the Corps' mandate is to address storm surge. We get that. Some of the nature-based solutions that are in the Sherwood design report and many of these other reports would not by themselves address storm surge. We get that too. We also believe that many of these nature-based solutions make the overall objective of the wall as it's proposed by the Corps more effective. And that's what we would like to see significant evaluation of. We don't have all the answers, and neither does the Corps. There needs to be significant evaluation to enhance that overall, the overall objective of the project, and including multiple benefits. So that's the second point in the document that you see here. And then the third one is, again, further analysis, further evaluation, how to incorporate nature-based features into the non-structural measures that have been proposed for Rosemont and Bridgeview. So I know that was a lot of words from me, but I'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions or comments. Susan, you're on mute.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Susan. Lost my connection.
Trying to unmute here. I did read the 41 pages and thank you for that. I wanted to know, I guess procedurally, the questions that you all raised about the EIS seem to me to be really serious and substantial. And I'm wondering how that lands on the Army Corps and what satisfaction in terms of answers we will have either before the council has to make this decision or during PED. What is the timing and what is the expected response situation to that? The point of doing an EIS was to answer these things, and the questions clearly remain. So I'm not sure about next steps on that.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I don't think that all of the questions that we've raised and others who've submitted comments, and we've seen, from the aquarium and from Charlestown Neighborhood Association, just to name a couple, I don't know that all of the answers are going to be provided before council will be making its decision. So what we're talking about is sort of, they're not parallel processes, but they are, the process that we are conducting as a committee and providing our input to city council so that they can have the benefit of our thinking to make their own decision. That's what we're talking about here. And what I've put forward in this document in these 3 bullets is kind of a synthesized or some highlights from our comment on the draft EIS, which under NEPA has its own timeline and its own process. And the Corps will evaluate all of the comments that it's received on the draft EIS and make a final determination. And I'm not the expert on exactly when that happens, but I think that happens before we go to PED. And, frankly, we have some concerns about that. And because that's a significant legal action, but that's a whole different, very important and very related arena. And as I've said in this committee, I've said in discussions with Dale, with the mayor, just underscore with the Corps, we as the Conservation League want to be part of progress. We want to be helpful and supportive. And our raising of concerns is to help this be a better project, not to try to shut it down. We want to be bringing our resources and our expertise to improving this project.
So just to be clear, the response to the EIS will occur before PED, according
Now,
to.
I could be wrong about that. I'm not totally clear on the timing, but I think that's right.
Okay. And does the public get to see that?
Again, this is a core question about how they handle the process, but I think that what we heard from Wes is that they will provide some documentation of, all of the comments are public, right? That's public record. You can see all of them, and how they are adjudicating the comments. I think as part of the NEPA process, they have to provide that documentation, but I don't know at what level of detail. We do know that they're not going to go back into the other public comment period on the EA, on the environmental assessment. That's locked down. Now we're in a different process.
Okay, thanks. Complicated.
Susan, if you have additional comments there on the core process, just send them to Kayla and copy me on it. We'll get them to Wes, and whatever answers we can get, we'll get them to you. Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
You're welcome. Well, thank you, Laura. We'll that's super helpful. Great recommendation. I know it's been one that we've had circled for since the get-go to have on here. So good to have language framed up around it and something we can incorporate. And then Susan, or Kayla, do you mind putting Susan's up on the screen as you have, or let me say first, are there any other questions or comments with regards to Laura's recommendation? I didn't see any hands, but I want to make sure.
I think you have a motion, Haygood, in the chat from.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr. Chair, if you want to put a motion and get a second to just do a approval of this one, then we can move on to Susan's.
Yes, thank you, Jordy. Thank you, Kaylin. I will put forward a motion to incorporate Laura's language into our series of recommendations. Let's see, I guess, do I have a second?
Second.
I guess what I do, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, so moved. Let's see, now let's go to, thank you very much, Laura. Let's go to Susan's. Oh, here we go. Great, thank you, Kaylin.
Yeah.
So you can see here, it's the language in bold is what would be incorporated. Thank you, Susan, for drafting this. We don't need to read it, but Susan, if you have any associated commentary or anything color you'd like to give on it, I think it's pretty straightforward, and appreciate you writing it in that manner.
I just restating what the ordinance basically implies, and that is that this committee should continue doing its work before, during, and during PED, and that the ordinance allows for each member to serve up to two-year terms. So we have a ways to go as a committee, and I would just recommend to council that whatever they need to do to endorse that they do it.
Thanks. Bob, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would propose an addendum, and that is, as we pivot from feasibility to actual, I guess additional study, but pretty soon brick and mortar. I think this committee needs to CFO sit with us as well. And I'd suggest we add that to the resolution.
I didn't hear that whole thing. You blanked out there. That who sits with us?
The CFO.
Oh, good. Absolutely.
So Bob, as far as fitting that into this language, we could put it somewhere in the first group of related parties that Susan put in here. Maybe directly before and other appropriate parties. As the city's finance department, would that be an appropriate way to put it?
CFO, for this size of a project, this significance to the peninsula and the city, should be the CFO. Humble opinion.
There you go. We'll say chief financial officer. Kalen, does that fit in the language okay?
Yeah.
I think so. So you just after the city civic design department and chief financial officer and other appropriate parties. Yeah, that's fine.
Great. Great. Bob, does that get you taken care of?
Now, are we saying that we would interact, or that individual would be a member of this group where would be more substantive?
The way it's written here is members of the 3F83 Army Corps Peninsula Study Committee are committed to engaging with, and then it goes through. So it would be included in one of those parties that we are committed to engaging with. Is the way
I'm suggesting something different, and I understand it would, since the membership of this group is ordained by a council resolution. I think specifically this group needs the wisdom of the CFO sitting with us. And I understand that would take a revision to the ordinance that chartered us.
That's correct, because there's currently no city staff or not members of the committee. So that would require a new ordinance to add any additional members or change the makeup of the committee.
Kaylin, is there precedence for city staff to be formal members of committees like this?
I mean, usually city staff is on a committee as kind of, guidance, and council members are obviously committee members. I'm sorry, I'd have to do a little research and check with our legal department. I'm just thinking of some of the committees that I sit on, but sometimes I'm a designee for the mayor, which is like a council member. So
Gotcha.
would have to check with the legal about that possibility, but it would require an updated ordinance.
Maybe we could make it a.
Well, I don't intend to speak for the whole committee. Do other people agree, or if there's not widespread support for that proposal, it need to go, into a research phase?
Maybe we can make that a separate recommendation.
Yeah, my whole thought on it is, I mean, I don't know. Again, we'll see what everybody says, and point is that I don't know why Amy time, as available, couldn't be a regular attendee of this meeting, such as, Kaylin and Dale are here. That'd be my thought. I mean, it accomplishes the same goal without, practically speaking, without having to reinvent the ordinance. But
I would just say, from a city, and this has been discussed before, capacity point of view, I think leaving it with the language of engaging with the CFO would then, with the intentions of having whether the CFO, or if for some reason she couldn't make a designee or a deputy, but, you know, obviously she's overrun with capacity at some point. So the feasibility of every single meeting her sitting on, if it doesn't relate to finance, may be challenging. But I think if you're putting it in there that it's committed to engaging with, and how that's interpreted could be discussed in the future, depending on, you know, the topics that this committee is covering.
That's
No.
fine. I'm just concerned that a lot of these topics will increasingly relate to what Amy says grace over. And, you know, we don't have enough engagement. We don't have enough interaction.
Well, and I think too, Bob,
We don't have enough questions answered.
our thought for,
you know, a lot of people are over. Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, and I think, you know, our thought, like a lot of what the committee would be doing if the city decides to move into PED over the next year would be analyzing that financing further. And I think, you know, our thought would be we would invite, with the chair as, you know, bringing the agendas forth, we would have somebody on that call. You know, the CFO would be invited. You know, she had every intention of attending today. She had a family emergency, so she wasn't able to, and let me know first thing this morning. But our intentions are, as we move forward and these topics cover financing, to include. So I think if you add the CFO to that language, that would get those underlying intentions. But obviously the committee's decision on how they want to interpret that.
Laura, I saw your hand up, and then I forget who was next, but please go for it.
Yeah, I think that what is bothering me a little bit about this language, which Bob, I don't want to speak for you, may be a similar sensation that you're having, is the way it reads is that this committee is committed to engaging with these different entities, the Corps, the city, the resilience, chief of resilience, the CFO. It doesn't say that those entities are committed to engaging with the committee. So if there were a way that, and I understand we don't want to do a lot of research and try to get these, you know, city officials on the committee and go around our elbow, but if there was some way that we could say, this committee is committed to continuing to engage in this process if the city decides to go into PED, and in order to do so, requests the support and engagement of ... and all of and fill in all of those entities.
Sounds good to me.
Hello, everybody. If I may jump in on this, you know, there are other departments and divisions within the city beyond those that are listed here that will be extremely relevant to PED. The Parks Department, for example, Jason Kronsberg chairs the DRC, you know, the Planning Department as a whole, you know, others, of course. And so maybe we don't need to be specific to departments within the city. We just maybe say relevant city staff, relevant to the built environment and the Army Corps project, or something of that nature. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. Makes sense. Let's see. Well, maybe maybe what we'll do is this. If everybody could, you know, Bob, Laura, you know, Susan, if you have any other commentary, and then I guess aside from the Parks Department, Alan, if you have any thoughts, and I know if you have any thoughts, you know, please share them with Kaylin of groups we should include as far as engaging in this process. And Kaylin, anybody else you think, why don't we circulate the additional commentary and continue to refine this to make something that we can all agree on including. Because I think the concept is there. I think it sounds like there's some wording items that we need to address. Does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts there beyond John, what they would put in in their commentary on the language.
If you all want to send them to me, I'll rework the sentences and get them back to you. We can do this by email, maybe.
Sounds good.
Aren't able to hold votes via email, but what we can do is present it at the next meeting for a quick motion.
We can't vote by email? Or we can't
No.
vote? No.
No, it has to be in the public meeting as a public committee with a quorum.
Kaylin, so that was a question that came up earlier, whether we could conduct business via unanimous consent. And so the answer to
You can
that
if
is
it's,
no,
if
because
it's
of
in
the
the
public
if
meeting.
it's public meeting, correct. You know, every communications is with a committee is, you know, foiable and things of that action. So our legals just directed us that if the committee is going to take any actionable items, that they be done in the public meeting setting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So not hearing any other comments on it. I think what I'll leave as an action item is for everybody. So just moving forward, and this will go for this coming week. When Dale gets back, work with Kaylin, Dale, and start drafting some language. It'll basically be what was presented to council. I forget the date, but to council with the addition of, hey, let's, you know, cautiously, you know, for that kind of straw vote, cautiously move into PAD subject to clarification on these series of issues. And so I'm going to go ahead and circulate that language. And please, again, this next week, instead of having a meeting a week from now, please use that time you would use to go ahead, edit, revise, comment on that language. And then, you know, we'll press forward from there. And the week following, so our next regularly scheduled meeting, November the 17th, we'll discuss that language. Does that sound good to everybody? Any questions, comments, thoughts? Bob, I see your hand up.
Yeah, if it's okay with the members, I'll take a shot at drafting some form of staffing.
Yeah, please go for it. Yeah.
A recommendation, and maybe it goes to the total group. Maybe Susan and Laura, if that sounds amenable.
Sure.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thanks, y'all. With that, I think we're ready to adjourn. It's pretty incredible. I think this is our just about a minute early. So, all right, y'all. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.